they like.
All right, good. So we've begun recording. My name is Paul Earlbaum. I'm the chair of the Vermont State Ethics Commission. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This is a really good turnout. We hope this is going to be a productive session to learn what we can about your views about what municipalities, towns, and cities need by way of some sort of ethics code or enforcement or whatever. So we're looking forward to your comments. There's some documents that I guess are posted in the chat to take a look at with some questions. We'll have some questions, but mostly we want to listen. I'm one of the 5 commissioners. There are 2 commissioners here. I'll turn this over to the other commissioner who's here, but also we have our executive director and 2 staff people here. They can introduce themselves in a moment, but now I'll turn it over to the other commissioner who's here, who's Chris Davis.
Thank you, Paul. This is Chris Davis. As Paul said, I'm one of the commissioners. I've actually been commissioner from the outset, the formation of the Ethics Commission some years ago. I'm an attorney in Burlington, Vermont, and appointed by the Vermont Bar Association. And thank you all for coming. As Paul said, we're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. I wanted to throw in one comment. Is part of our suggestion as to what we would be doing is also training and education, not just creating a municipal code, if that's what we're directed to do. So I'll turn this over to Chris Sibert, our executive director.
Yes, thanks everyone for coming. So I just want to give a quick overview of the Ethics Commission for people who aren't familiar with us. So we've been in existence for about 5 years, and at this point in time, we're mainly a service organization, and we serve state of Vermont public servants, employees, volunteers by providing advice and guidance around the state code of ethics, which is a code of ethics that covers just state of Vermont employees, so people working for the state, not municipal officials. And we also work with the public in the sense that we accept complaints that come from any public servant, but also members of the public related to ethical conduct in state government. So we serve the public in that way, and we serve state of Vermont public servants in the sense that we provide them with advice and guidance around the state code of ethics. So what we've been tasked with for this upcoming legislative session is providing some recommendations to the legislature related to municipal ethics. So municipal ethics is an issue that has come across our desk quite frequently in the past few years, even though we don't currently have any jurisdiction over municipal ethics, but we still get calls from a lot of members of the public, but also municipal officials themselves seeking advice or guidance or seeking recourse if they have an ethics complaint or concern. And so we know it's an issue out there, and there isn't really a way for people to, I guess, have their concerns or requests satisfied because there isn't, one kind of centralized entity that's handling municipal ethics in the state. So we recognize this being an issue that deserves some attention, and the legislature has as well. So they've asked us to provide some recommendations this coming legislative session and ways in which we may be able to improve the municipal ethics framework. And we've been doing some research over the past few months. We've completed a research project that was one of our primary researchers, authors of a short report is here. His name is TJ Jones. He's been a consultant with the Ethics Commission for a number of years, and he was formerly the state ethics prosecutor for the state of Connecticut. He's now a member of the State Board of Ethics in Connecticut, and he also teaches public policy and ethics at UConn. So he's actually our expert on national practices related to ethics, and that includes municipal ethics. So if people have any specific questions, we're going to be able to hand those over to him, because we're not just taking comments today, we're also taking questions from anyone who has one. But as a result of this preliminary research that we've done, we've come up with some thoughts on what we think might be useful for Vermont to consider in terms of a municipal ethics framework. And one of those elements that may be included in a framework for Vermont would be a state code of ethics, or a code of ethics that covers all municipal officials in Vermont. Number 2 would be a centralized advisory training and guidance. Sorry, losing my words, but that for the Ethics Commission to be able to serve municipal officials as well as state government officials, and then also looking at options for recourse if somebody wanted to file a complaint. And so we kind of have those general details in this handout here that's linked in our chat if you want to take a look. But mainly we really want to hear from people if you want to hear about your experiences with municipal ethics and also your thoughts on what a municipal ethics framework for Vermont might look like. And we've heard from a few people prior to the session who would like to speak. So I think that we can just start out with that unless anybody has any questions first. But if you'd like to speak and you haven't reached out to us beforehand, feel free to just raise your hand, look below in the toolbar in Zoom. You can raise your hand and then just drop a comment in the chat box. And then we'll be looking for that to call on you when it comes time. So I think that the first person that we have heard that we will be hearing from is Bradley Holt. If you are ready to tell us your thoughts, then we're ready to hear them. So
yes, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. My name is Bradley Holt. My husband and I have lived in Richmond, Vermont for the past 8 years. For the past 2.5 years, we've been engaged as members of the public in the review process for a proposed land development project nearby. As part of our research, we watched past development review board meetings, and our intent was to better understand the town's review process. What we found was board members repeatedly violating our town's code of ethics since the code was adopted by our select board in 2019. Through these recordings, we witnessed board members represent clients in front of the board. In one particularly egregious example, a board member represented another board member in a matter before the board. We witnessed board members failing to recuse themselves when they had a conflict of interest. We also witnessed many examples of board members claiming to recuse themselves, yet continuing to engage in the meeting in some capacity. One example, a board member moderated a meeting while recused. In another example, a board member sat next to a client they were representing while recused. All of these examples were violations of the town's code of ethics as adopted in 2019. Through their actions, board members demonstrated a complete disregard for maintaining the public trust, and this was quite concerning as interested persons in a matter before the board. At this point, we have chosen not to file an ethics complaint. Such a complaint could be seen as adversarial and would risk complicating our position as interested persons in an ongoing quasi-judicial and judicial matter. Given our experience overall, we don't feel that the town is prepared to grapple with these ethical concerns and would be unlikely to fully recognize, acknowledge, or address our complaint. Put simply, we believe that the town culture is not one that would be effective at upholding the town's code of ethics. In fact, we recently discovered that the select board adopted an updated code of ethics a few months ago, which redefines the code such that many of the actions that I described earlier are no longer considered unethical by the town. Board members can now represent clients in front of their own board. Board members can now fully participate in meetings, even if they have a conflict of interest, and do not have to recuse themselves. This updated code was hastily adopted with no discussion other than a discussion of font sizes, and with no meaningful opportunity for public input, as the agenda item topic did not reveal that the code of ethics was under discussion. It seems clear to me that municipalities are generally ill-equipped to manage an ethical framework and often fail at their responsibility to instill a culture where ethics are taken seriously. Members of the public are left questioning if ethical concerns will be properly investigated and handled by municipalities. Not just uniform standards, but uniform enforcement would help, perhaps in the form of this commission being able to receive complaints that have not been adequately addressed by a municipality. Thank you to the commission for this opportunity to speak regarding municipal ethics in Vermont. Thank you.
do you mind if I just ask one question? So you mentioned that you opted not to file a complaint. So is that an option that's available in your municipality? If you wanted to file a complaint, there's somebody who would hear the complaint?
There is a process for filing a complaint. Yes. Yep. Yeah. And that process is, I believe, similar in the 2019 code and the one that was just updated in 2023. But again, the changes made it so that many of the behaviors that we had observed are no longer in violation. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. And I think next up we have Annie Cooper. If you'd like to speak now.
Hi, yes, please. Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful that this committee exists. I only found out about you this afternoon. And the timing couldn't be better because I have been seeking a path, the best path for some stuff that I think could be better. And as I've discovered, there's nowhere to go. There's no one to tell your story to. There's no one to ask for help from. There's no one to clearly state problems within a municipality that can see it from a space of neutrality and assistance, and can understand how to help people in difficult positions. And that being said, I am so passionate about my community, so much so that I have more information than I want because I have worked as a staff member of my community. I have been on governmental board in my community. I have been on committees up the wazoo in my community. I have had remarkably privileged access to space inside offices and things. And so I've seen a lot. And mostly what I see is good people trying to get things done. But inside that space, there's not enough structure and not enough policy to create a level of respect and protocol for people to follow. And things get super messy, especially when there are people that understand how to take advantage of that. And what I seek is not to actually tell my story. I think it will hurt people, and I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in forward motion and forward growth. And so I think that my experience is one that can help me see what can be in place. Financial policies should be absolutely in space of municipality. There should be financial policies, structure. There should be ethical policies. And it should be across the board. All finances that come and go through municipality should be streamlined and done the same from department to department. This should be just clean and simple. XYZ gets done, XYZ gets done. If you didn't do this, you can't do that. And if it was clean about how the money comes in, what it does when it travels, and what it does when it gets out, and that was all done the same in every department with every person, there would be so much less space for someone to bend or be in gray areas. I'm from the 05452. You might have heard someone ask in the chat, you might have heard about us. We were a village inside a town. And so if you lived in the village of Essex Junction, you paid taxes to 2 municipalities. And then recently we had a vote on merger. That didn't go well. We did a revote on merger. It failed by the same amount of votes. And then ultimately the village separated and became its own municipality and is now the city of Essex Junction, which is very exciting. And it's my hope and my dream that as a new city, we can put policies in place. And the problem is that it has to kind of take precedence. You have to stop everything for a hot minute. I know I've gone by and beyond 3 minutes. I'm almost done. I'm sorry. It kind of stops. You have to kind of stop everything, and you have to put aside your personal, and I don't mean agenda in a bad way, but when you're running for public office, right, you have a dream, you have a vision, you want to really go at it, but for these things that have to be put in place to keep staff safe, to keep residents safe, to keep tax dollars safe, and to make sure that people are showing up in the right way, and that you're asking that of them, and you have boundaries in place so that everyone has to show up in the same way, you will have a healthier community, and your growth for the agenda that you might have and you envision for your community can come about better. I really am excited for your work, and thank you for allowing me the time to speak.
No, thank you very much, Annie. I really appreciate it, because I think you've really hit on an important point, and what we're trying to get at is that, and I think Chris mentioned earlier, is that we're looking to put structure in place, not to hurt people, but also to help people, so that they know what the rules are, what their obligations are. And, that's part of like training and advice. And so thank you for hitting on that point. And I see we have somebody else with their hand raised. So Glenn Anderson, if you would like to speak.
Yeah, hi, how's everybody doing? I'm going to just try to put my hand down as I'm doing this here. So so I just want to briefly introduce myself. I live here in Waterbury Center. I previously have done research consulting in a number of different professions and industries, including the Bar Association field. I've done work with Vermont Bar. We've done judicial evaluations in the past for about a decade and a half before I moved on to different pursuits. I also used to work for the ABA Center for Professional Responsibility, so my understanding of ethics is, I think, a little bit more advanced than others, and I'm not trying to present it in a way that suggests an aloofness, but rather just to suggest where I'm coming from as far as the priority of ethics in governance. So that's why I'm here, to listen to what you guys are up to. I've followed this when, previously Anthony Colino was championing this. It's big for me as well. I can echo some of the other things that some of the other folks previously have said. Recusals, I think, is a huge issue that definitely needs to be understood. I could touch on a quick case where I just am getting out of almost a half decade of environmental challenges in the environmental court, vis-a-vis a DRB, similar to the first speaker ruling. And because of that, it created some conflicts with a former select board chair of Waterbury, who was the opposing counsel, because of situations with a former wife, my marriage with a former, with a state employee. She's still employed as a teacher, and her husband now as a teacher. There's just been a lot of government officials moving sticks around to the point where, after a half decade of challenging various actual wildlife corridors and things that didn't necessarily prevail in the courts, we found out that this 45.1 acre subdivision proposal is actually, in fact, a full acre short. It's 44.2 acre parcel on a tax map. And so these things that happened were mostly because my other neighbor is the Agency of Natural Resources, a state agency, and it's the trailhead for the Mount Hunger parking lot, or for the Mount Hunger hike. And, I've been the trail adopter for 30 years now. So, it's an irony that this development has become such a hot button issue. So I don't mean to necessarily get into that here. I do want to help the framework improve, and I will reach out to you separately offline. My intent is not to flame people out, but rather to hold people accountable, because very specific people did very specific things that created a situation that now is bad for myself, for my neighbor, and a number of other people that all we're trying to do is present truth and facts. And the judicial process, and this is coming from somebody that has spent a long lifetime in a career championing the rule of law. I've been boxed out in many ways by some government officials that I think take it to the next level of where they think things should be rather than where they actually are. So I'm going to reach out, I'll share the facts. I'm not looking for you to retry cases, but I do need the state to understand the consequences of this are significant, because they're inherently all tied together, including things like nonprofits like the Stowe Land Trust, raising funds on a wildlife corridor that they mapped across our farm, just arbitrarily, So these are the kinds of things where real Vermonters are hurt by that massively. And while I have exceptions and I can understand nuance, there's a number of pieces that I think you guys might be able to adopt to hold municipalities accountable, because I think all too often it is a kind of Wild West sense of, the second guest spoke of the Essex Junction. Here in Waterbury, we know the former village. And, I happen to have a 3-rod square parcel from the former village that, was essentially what I thought was an abandoned spring. And so because of that, that created legal conflicts, which are resolved and settled, but I've been branded as somebody that was stealing public land. And this is, there are a lot of ironies are all twisted up in this. And it accelerated to the point where we made state news this summer, whereby a disgruntled employee took that information and weaponized it in a way that made him think he could firebomb our house with a Molotov cocktail. And the state troopers were here on a number of occasions in July. So I just want to impress upon you the consequences of what happens at low levels where people think nothing much. A perfect example, my Twitter handle that I got at Waterbury VT for our community to benefit from. Through my agency, I was doing a lot of pro bono work, Revitalizing Waterbury, the economic commerce group, which is a 501c, not actually a municipality, falsely went to Twitter and represented themselves as a municipality, and then got that Twitter handle and boxed me out of it. So these are the kinds of things where, the shades of gray are just so massively gray for some people that they have no way to pull themselves back in after they've made bad choices. So, hopefully I can empower you with some information that will help you really understand those nuances, because I've been down probably 30 different issues alone in this 30 years that I've been here, 32. So in any event, it's good to meet you all. I do look forward to sharing in the future, but I'll just leave it at that for now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's nice to hear from you. And yeah, we're always happy to get everything in writing. And I'll say that we've heard from a number of people just today who weren't really comfortable, speaking publicly, and so chose to email us instead. And so we're always happy to get your thoughts in writing. And I do kind of see a theme where like there's not a lot of confidence in impartiality, and there's lack of recourse, lack of confidence in impartiality, and lack of standards that are being enforced. So thank you very much for your
And the recusal part, just to reiterate, also, when it comes to tax assessing, one of my neighbors was the former tax assessor of Waterbury and Stowe. So it complicated a lot of pieces, but that's just another piece that you should think about. So great.
Okay.
Thanks again.
Thank you. And I think we have somebody else who's raised their hand, Elise Serta.
Yes, hi, Elise from Essex Junction. And I'm glad that you guys are doing this. Ethics has been off my radar, so it was great. When I saw this meeting was posted, I read the state ethics, the work that you've already done for the legislature. And I encourage anyone who hasn't read that to do that, because it kind of, I think, Christina, gives us a scope to your work, which is interesting for municipalities. So what I'm really curious about, and I'm hopeful that this work will take into account, is on the opposite end of it, is helping the public understand what is in the municipal purview and what standards we should be holding them to. Because I think, whomever you might talk to in a different town or city might have a different expectation for how a municipality operates, or in our instance, we have a city council, and what are the councilors held to, and what should we expect from them as voters and as constituents and residents of that municipality? And then what processes do we have to follow through for grievances or upsets, or, and how do ethics play into that? Because I think there's so much going on in a municipality that we need to understand as citizens. How do we interact with the people in our community who are representing us? What standards should we be holding them to? And what's out of the purview? What doesn't count? Because I don't think people are always really clear, and we all have different values and we all have different expectations. So if the ethics for municipalities reflects that sort of playing field, I think everyone then has a better understanding of how to participate and what expectations to have. So that's why I'm really excited about this work.
Well, thank you. That was a great comment. And I think that's what a lot of the state code of ethics was about, getting that adopted, was setting the standard. So there's a uniform standard for everyone, and that everyone understands what it is. So not just the people who are held to those standards, but for the public as well. So thank you very much for that comment. And I'd encourage anyone who's interested in the specifics of what a municipal code of ethics, statewide municipal code of ethics could look like, to take a look at the state code of ethics and just like see what topics are covered there, and let us know, like, do you think that those same topics should be covered for a municipal code of ethics? Do you think that they should be reduced in some way? Do you think they should be changed in some way? Do you think there's just a different considerations that come with working with municipalities that might come with working with state government? So I don't see anyone with their hand raised at the moment, but we're happy to hear from anyone else. And I guess that would lead us to maybe a situation where we can, ask you questions to get your general thoughts. So like at this moment in time, we are considering two possibilities to put forward when we're putting forward recommendations, looking at the state code of ethics, which now covers state of Vermont employees, and extending that to cover everyone who works for a municipality, all municipal officials, which can include elected municipal officials, appointed municipal officials, and in some other states, it also covers employees. But then we all are also looking at, modified code of ethics that would cover just municipal employees, because, perhaps there isn't an exact alignment. So other than conflict of interest, are there any topics that you in particular think should be covered by a municipal code of ethics? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Okay. Glenn?
Can I chime in for a second?
Yes.
Just really quick, I think, one thing that I didn't kind of get into, but that sort of prompted was just the general difference between an incorporated village or an incorporated municipality, as well as an unincorporated municipality. I think, I've seen a trend where more and more municipalities tend to be moving in that direction of incorporated from a business development perspective, trying to get grants, working with the state. And, it also comes with a level of consumption of natural resources that I think some people in some communities, like I know in Worcester, I'm the founder of the Worcester Range Collective, which is essentially a group of outdoor enthusiasts that enjoy the Worcester Mountain Range. But Waterbury is vastly different than Worcester. Worcester wants to be, as far as the people that engage with us, far more rural, less developed than Waterbury. We have huge bike trails, mountain bike trails, hiking trails, and all the reservoir stuff. So it's just a different, way of looking at it. And I think development growth and ethics that follow sometimes follow that idea of the business world, where sometimes we turn a blind eye, in a business reality to something that maybe we shouldn't. And I'm not saying that I'm opposed to development, but I also really don't like the traffic on Route 100 that we now see because of Stowe and Waterbury's choices. So if you're a longtime local, I work with farmers, folks that have been here in Vermont for a very long time. A lot of that disconnect and the xenophobia that I see has a lot to do with this idea that there's all this fast growth. And with it comes shady ethics in some cases. I'm not trying to point fingers specifically, but that division of how we structure municipalities, maybe I'll just turn that back as potential food for thought.
Okay. No, I think that's an interesting point, because I think every municipality, has their own process and procedures. If somebody has an ethics concern that could relate to a conflict of interest that's related to, business development. So if somebody does have an ethics concern, but you live outside of that municipality, but something that's happening in the municipality affects you, how do you express that concern? So thank you. That's a good point. And I think that we have somebody else with a raised hand. And
yeah, and I was just really quick, sorry, but also the idea of the embedded municipality within a municipality was the second part of that. So cool.
Okay,
Thanks.
No problem. Thanks. So I think Lorraine Zaloom wants to speak. Not sure if Erin is there to unmute her. Oh, you are speaking. I think we can't hear you. Or I can't.
Is your microphone on?
I don't think any of us are hearing her, Chris.
Okay, is Gina on? If Gina wants to speak for you.
I can try. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I mean, the better sister. Can I say that out loud? Because she's muted. I think we were talking. Oh. We're from Essex Town, and we've had issues with when you were talking. Does that cover? Was the state considering including covering commissions and committees along with municipal staff? We're finding sometimes concerned about conflict of interest. Vermont is so small. There's only 2 degrees of separation, if even that. So when you have things that are involving money and development, and then people are on the inside, I'm not sure where the line is, because everybody knows everybody. So it's hard to make sure that communities are pushing things fairly with all considerations, if that makes sense. And then I also, along those lines, have a friend who is a civil engineer in Massachusetts, and he said he's been to dozens and dozens of planning zoning meetings, and their solution statewide was to Make sure that chairs rotate, especially on committees that are very influential financially, and to make sure that there's a break in serving time so that you make sure there aren't any shenanigans going on, that you have a pause, and that the state has someone that actually shows up at municipal meetings and make sure they're running the meetings correctly. So it's kind of a spot check. I think of it sort of like how restaurants have health officers, inspectors go to restaurants to make sure that their refrigerators are the right temperature and they're serving food at the right temperature. In, I think it was Massachusetts, he said they spot check municipal meetings to make sure that they're warned in time, that people are being heard, that, you know, that they're following the rules. I hope that was right, Lorraine. Did I? That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And actually, I wouldn't mind throwing that to TJ. I know that Bradley Holt is waiting to speak again, but TJ, is that something that you've experienced? Because I know we were looking to Rhode Island and Massachusetts as two of our examples in New England of states that do really well when it comes to ethics generally, but also municipal ethics. So I didn't know if that's something that's commonly done. Of course, if you don't know, just say you don't know. But if you've heard of it, it'd be interesting to hear if that's something that, you know, should we be looking at something like that down the road when we have a maybe more advanced framework in place.
In terms of the specific example, I'm unfamiliar with that. Massachusetts does regulate their municipalities at the state level. So the State Ethics Commission regulates county, municipal, and state officials all from the same place. Rhode Island does the same thing. So that may play into that particular circumstance.
Okay. Interesting. Almost like an audit, a random audit. So thanks. Okay. And now Bradley Holt.
Christina, you'd asked a few minutes ago about the question of conflicts of interest. And I think one thing to consider there, and I'd bring this up in my comments, but to put a highlight on it, is that this question of conflicts of interest when it comes to quasi-judicial boards, I think that's something for you to look closely at in terms of these frameworks. I can't speak to the reasoning why our policy was recently changed the way it was, but to me, it looks like it prioritizes quote unquote functioning quasi-judicial board over ethics, meaning that it prioritizes that the board can continue to meet and continue to do its business over not having a conflict of interest, and that a conflict of interest is allowed if they can't continue to do their business. I personally don't think that's right, but I think that's something that would need to be grappled with at a statewide ethics level and to be debated and considered, just because I think there are other ways to make sure that you have a functioning board other than allowing conflicts of interest to be allowed. So.
Yeah, and there is case law, national case law, and I think including some in the state of Vermont related to that issue, because there is that tension, I think, especially in a smaller state where, like, you know, people are afraid that, you know, if the conflicts of interest rules are too strict, then therefore it's going to interfere with the ability of the board to actually work. But generally speaking, that's more of a concern that is in theory, like I say, in theory than it is in reality. And actually, I do think that TJ might have some comments to weigh in that, because that's something that's come up within our office in the past few years, with people kind of making that argument and kind of stretching the argument a bit too far as well. So I don't know if TJ, you wanted to kind of weigh in on that a bit there, just to help make us more intelligent about this issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's called the rule of necessity, and a lot of boards and commissions adopt that in order to have the committee or commission continue their business, even though they may not have the exact quorum, or some do it in the cases where there is a suggested conflict of interest. For those situations, it's easy for unregulated boards and commissions to play around with the rules, but the regulatory answer is usually, you know, the agency's got to do its business, but there's a full disclosure mechanism that has to be on the record, and that way, at a bare minimum, whatever conflicts exist are disclosed to the public.
Yeah, thank you.
And I can describe a little bit about how it works in the state level now. So if somebody has a conflict of interest, then, they should recuse themselves. But there are also options if somebody feels like the conflict of interest is de minimis, or it's far removed, or, there's some reason why they feel like they can move forward impartially. At this stage, they have to file a conflict of interest disclosure form that's available to the public. So they can't just, themselves decide they need to move forward, but the public has access to that information so that they can help them, they can make their own determination. And if they feel like something is happening that shouldn't be happening, then they can raise the issue publicly. Okay.
Yep. Can I have one more quick comment on that? I think the situation that, if I can go into slightly more detail, is we're seeing a situation where we have a development review board that is staffed almost entirely by lawyers, and that has no what's the word? I forget the word for it, but backups, right? And so it's sort of like structurally designed to always have necessity to continue the business, even though it's conflict. When in my mind, there are other options, right? Like you don't need to all be lawyers on the board, for example. That seems unusual for a board to be staffed entirely by lawyers, right? So it's sort of a claim of necessity, but is it really necessary, or is it a structural problem with the board itself, right? So I think that's I think you need to look, in my opinion, I would ask this commission, when you're looking at those rules, to look at those complexities in terms of what a statewide municipal ethics framework would look like, specifically with those quasi-judicial boards. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. You do have to look at board structure. If you have people who are continually not recusing themselves when they should recuse themselves because of the rule of necessity, then that means there is an underlying problem with who's sitting on the board. So I just wanted to bring up, because I think Lorraine made a point in the chat about somebody being hired in their town without the job posting, so that there were other candidates and there was only one person interviewed. And I'm just going to highlight that because that is something that's come into our office before in the context of municipal ethics with, and it kind of goes along, I think, with smaller towns where things are kind of done in that sort of manner. So it is a complaint that has come into our office, like a few times before, where there's nothing we can do about it, but just in terms of people being hired without there being transparency is something that we've heard before. So not just now, so I wanted to point it out because it does seem to be something of a common issue there. And I see that we've had a few new people join us since we started. So just want to let everybody know, if you have any comments you want to make, if you have any questions you want to ask about the municipal ethics framework, just raise your hand or put a comment in the chat, and then we're happy to respond to you or hear what you have to say. Yeah. And I guess I'll put another question out there because, we are talking about recourse. And I think that's one of the main issues that people have brought up here, is that if they want to file a complaint, they don't really feel like there's a place for it to be handled impartially. And so we have a few thoughts, a few suggestions that we've been looking into in terms of like what a recourse could look like. One would be for complaints related to municipal ethics could come to the State Ethics Commission. There could be a separate state board set up for to hear municipal complaints. There could be regional boards, which would kind of, I think, alleviate some concerns when it comes to local control. So somebody could file a complaint with a regional board made up of people from, say, Southern Vermont versus Northern Vermont. And then perhaps there could be a state board or another entity that hears appeals. And then there's obviously the option of just keeping it, local and requiring everyone to set up their own mechanism to hear complaints. So does anyone here want to have any thoughts about what they'd like to weigh in on that issue? Just
I'd love to. I don't know if we're waiting for you to call on our hands.
sure, go for it.
First of all, I want to point out that Joanna Burgess's hand has been up, I think, for another reason. So I'd like to answer this, and just because I know it's hard to see sometimes. Speaking to the point that you're saying about, to the point that Bradley Holt is making about who makes up the board and how that's made up, it's so maddening and frustrating because there's no one to go to. You can try to garner support from the residents, but no one's going to get the kind of, like, you can't, the only people that can change it would be by votes or whatever. And to go out and gather that support is exhausting. It's a 4-year job at least. I'm kidding, and so yes, to have those boards that crossover is better. I don't think people investigating themselves in any way or looking at themselves is the right way to go. I think there's no really healthy way for a community, a municipality to really look at itself and hear itself inside itself and determine best practice for itself when there's that kind of conflict. So I like what you were saying about that more versatile concept. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And sorry, I did miss that there were two other people waiting to speak. So Joanna Burgess and then also Donna Zugis. I hope I said your name right.
Hi, I'm Joanna and I live in Westmore, Vermont, which is teeny little town. So does Donna, up in the Northeast Kingdom. And we have, how to put it nicely, some problems with our select board in terms of their transparency, their ethics, let's just say one of the select board people, let's just say he's been on it for 50 years. He was more than 50 years. He's been on it since 1972. That in and of itself is not a problem, but there are some issues with communication and transparency and just some of the local initiatives we've been doing, trying to get Westmore on an Australian ballot to make things more equitable and fair. To put things in perspective, our little town has 178 year-round residents because it is by Lake Willoughby. So there's a lot of people, a lot of folks who have second homes here and things like that. Just talking to my neighbors, both year-round residents, part-time residents, one of the major problems we're having with our select board and transparency is even allowing something as simple as a Zoom meeting to happen for all select board meetings. They're flatly refusing to allow that to happen, which really greatly reduces the participation that people have in our local town meetings. Is there recourse for that? I mean, the select board is flatly denying allowing people to use Zoom to, at any of their meetings, whether they be budget meetings, regular select town meetings. We're having a special town meeting coming up about Australian ballot, of which the select board is very unhappy about. But that's sort of just one of my very small mundane questions. Are there like little resources like that we could appeal to someone to say, you can't just arbitrarily say, no, you can't Zoom a public meeting?
To be honest, since we don't have jurisdiction over municipal ethics, that's not an area that we get into. So I don't know the answer to that question. And not to kind of throw this onto somebody else, but maybe the Secretary of State's office would be the better resource to know something like that. You may have already tried them. I think that we're kind of we kind of end up in a circle of municipal ethics where somebody calls us and then we try and refer them on to somebody else, and there's no real source of authority for a lot of the questions that everyone gets. So that's one of the things that we're trying to resolve with making these recommendations when it comes to municipal ethics. But unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you now in terms of whether that's allowed or what the lie is around that. So apologies.
Well, I mean, I don't think they could legally block us from doing it. I mean, I have no idea. It's a public space, it's a public meeting. But I'm just wondering if there was a channel for petitioning something like that, or at least making it known. And perhaps Donna or Chris, who's also in this meeting, might have something and probably is more eloquent than I am about it. I have no idea. But anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. And I think Donna is up next.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm doing this right. We'll see. Can you hear me? Yes, I hope. Okay. Yeah, I think the main problem in Westmore, it's a beautiful town, a beautiful rural area. There's a lot of good people here. Unfortunately, there's a handful of people that think only their ideas and their agendas count, and they're the ones that are holding the seats. That's why they're against Australian ballot. We actually have 278 full-time residents, and only about 60 voted last year when you have to appear in town meeting, and about 150 when they had to offer it during COVID, they had to do the Australian ballot, and we got a much better turnout. So that's how they control participation by the community. And when you're talking about the hybrid Zoom meetings, even, and I'll say the acronym wrong, but Vermont City Leagues and Towns that they're a member of offers education and a module for them to follow to do it, but they come up with every excuse. But if a member of the board, the select board, or the planning committee can attend, they're allowed to attend by telephone, but no resident is allowed that. And I think that's discriminatory, and I think it's controlling, and I think there should be ethics somehow should cover that. And the other thing is, and of course, it's quite obvious that it's they're trying to make sure that they're not transparent. So even when you go down to the town hall, records are not easily found, and you always have to return. The things that they'll allow you to see, yeah, they'll be there. But when you want to get to the nitty gritty, especially with budget season coming up, for preparation for budget season, that's where I'd like to know how you could help us with municipal ethics, because they really do feel like they can run the town the way they want, but they'll lean on the state at certain times. Like if you do bring up an issue, especially like with permits, you bring up an issue, someone submits a permit and it says, do you have any water on your property? And just because they put no on the permit and the zoning administrator approves the permit, it goes through and there's water on the property. And at the top of the permit, it says it's the applicant's responsibility. And basically the answer you get is, well, you can take them to environmental court. It's like, but why can't we hold them responsible for it's their permit, it's their application? How come we can't hold the municipality responsible for following their own rules?
Yeah. No, it is a good point. And I think that's one of the things that, when we're thinking about having a municipal code of ethics or, kind of like third party impartiality to address ethics concerns, is that, if the only avenue of recourse is court, then you need somebody with a lot of stamina and you need somebody with a lot of money who's going to actually take that issue that far. And so it does kind of become an access, I don't want to, use this term lightly, but access to justice issue for a lot of people. So that is something that's on our minds in terms of how a municipal code of ethics could help with, transparency when it comes to documents that should be available to the public. I don't think that we specifically have considered that within the municipal code of ethics, but we can put that in our list of things to look into. And certainly if you have any thoughts about it, then please, anytime between, now and the next month, feel or even, longer, feel free to email us if you have any ideas or anything in particular that you'd like for us to consider.
Okay, just one other thing is how also can we hold them accountable for not being inclusive to all residents and property owners? It's like by not having Zoom or hybrid option, property owners that are only here certain times of the year and not here at other times, can't have a say in the government. Oh, for instance, last night's meeting, they just cut all our trash pickup and transfer station and everything in half. The time that it's open, the delivery, and they knew that they were going to have flack if they did it at any other time, because it was already on our voting thing one year, not last year, the year before. Do you want to stop the pickup? Do you want to do this? So they just made a unilateral decision yesterday, and this was after there was probably like 8 people at the meeting, and once 6 of them left, then they announced it. It was like, okay, what isn't that good timing?
Right. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
We have a few more people who are waiting. And so Bradley Holt, then Ruth Hardy, then Bill and Leslie, and then Glenn Anderson again.
So I just wanted to answer your question from before about addressing ethical concerns. And I think I also agree. I don't think towns are equipped to handle ethics complaints, like to properly, have the culture in place, have the understanding in place, and the capability and to do that. So I think it does need to be either regional, as you said, if we want some sort of local control, or a statewide board. I don't have a strong opinion about either, but I do believe that I from what I've seen, I don't think a town in general would be equipped to properly address that, and they'd be in their own bubble in terms of not necessarily taking the issue seriously. So I just want to put a warning for that in terms of answering your question on that point.
Thank you very much. I think next we have Ruth Hardy.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, everyone. I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I chair the Government Operations Committee in the Senate, and we are one of the committees that actually asked the Ethics Commission to report back to us on their recommendations for a municipal code of ethics. So I really want to thank Christina and her staff and all the commissioners for doing this work and creating these public forums for people like you to weigh in on municipal ethics. And I've been listening while I've been making dinner for my family. So I just want to thank you all for coming. I also I wanted to weigh in because another issue just came up, which is open meetings. And that is a slightly different issue than ethics issues, although there's obviously overlapping sort of jurisdiction or technicalities and issues with the two. But we also in the Senate and House Government Operations Committees will be looking at revising our open meeting laws over the next session. COVID, as you know, created a whole different universe for how we define open meetings, how we run public meetings, the ability to run things remotely, and having everybody sort of feel like that was normal was totally different during COVID. And we created temporary statutory laws to oversee open meetings during COVID, and we've extended those a number of years. We did so last year, and they expire on June 30th of 2024. And so we'll be looking at those this next session. So I invite you to weigh in about open meetings issues once the legislature is back in session in January, and also really appreciate hearing all of your suggestions and concerns about municipal ethics. I'm not sure if I can stay for the whole thing, but just really wanted to say that we are taking this seriously. We will be taking it up in the next legislative session beginning in January. And thanks to all of you, and especially thanks to Christina for making all of this happen. So have a great rest of the meeting.
Thanks very much. And that's interesting because we do occasionally get questions in our office about the open meeting law, and that's just not something that we handle. So it's great to hear that that's going to be looked at. And if we get any, calls about in the future, we'll let people know, and we'll let them know to reach out to you as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Christina.
That's good. Okay, next we have Bill and Leslie.
Hi, my name's Bill Struno. Sorry, my login says Bill and Leslie. Leslie's not here. So I live in Charlotte. I'm glad to see Shay Evans here. And we've got several issues here, but I'm a former member of our planning commission, and I've also served on planning commissions and DRBs in South Burlington and Shelburne. And I see a serious ethics problem, and this is going to be echoed by many people in every community that I've lived in, at the municipal level, not only with the select board, but with development review boards and planning commissions. It seems to be if you have your own agenda, you apply to serve on these boards, or you run for a select board. And then if you're on the select board, you appoint people that have a similar agenda. And conflicts of interest are very apparent. People that are actively involved in real estate serve on DRBs and planning commissions. I've seen very good qualified people that might have an environmental background get turned down from serving on these boards because of they're viewed as maybe having bias. But the opposite doesn't hold true. People that are involved in real estate and builders serve on these boards with no action, to not have them serve. This is overall really hurting the recruitment of other qualified individuals. And at the select board level, without having some sort of recall mechanism that Charlotte doesn't have, we find that our select board does a lot of bullying. And if people won't even approach the select board or even pay attention to the select boards anymore because they feel that it's useless to do so. So ethics, and I want to stress, this is not just where I live in Charlotte here. This is really statewide in every community that I've lived in. I hear the same complaints over and over again. And that there's no recourse. I mean, getting a select board member to step down is very difficult, if not impossible. And I also want to bring up the current issue with the Senate. I'm glad, Ruth Hardy, you're here because S-100, which recently passed and was promoted by Keisha Ram Hinsdale, it's obvious to most people, including other senators that I've talked to, that she had a major conflict of interest with this bill. I mean, if you look at the actual bill that she introduced, it looks like it was tailor-made for her husband's business, which converts single-family homes to multiplexes. And the senators that I spoke to agreed that she should have never been allowed to not only introduce this bill, but chair her committee. But no senators would take a stand and file a complaint out of fear of reprisal. So if senators fear reprisal, can you imagine how the average resident feels about reprisal in actually trying to file a complaint? I don't really see anybody taking any action about how to solve these issues. So I'm really curious to hear some thoughts from people.
Well, thanks very much. And so, you brought up, recall select board members, but I would say if they're having a strong conflict of interest policy that's in place, where you actually had to recuse yourself if you did have a conflict of interest over an issue, specifically a financial conflict of interest. I think any kind of conflict of interest policy that's going to be in place is going to cover financial interests. To me, that would have like kind of a chilling effect on people who are running for office specifically to enrich themselves, right? I mean, I'm kind of extrapolating from what you're saying, but if we're looking at like what's in front of us now and how, a stronger code of ethics or uniform code of ethics for municipal officials might help with the situations that you're talking about, like a conflict of interest policy that is enforceable, I think would, make people think twice about running for office if they were always going to have to recuse themselves from issues where they had that particular financial interest. Yeah, that was my first thought when you asked for thoughts on that. So.
Can I respond to that?
Of course.
Connecting all the dots and finding a major financial interest is very hard to do, and unlikely, and hard to prove, as well as just to find it out. But what you have is situations where what we would call one hand washing the other, where they'll promote their own agenda so that maybe their friends will benefit. And then those friends do the same in return. And so it's, it's unlikely somebody is going to like approve their own project, but they'll approve their friend's project. So there's a circle there of, the conflict of interest statutes do talk about how you're not supposed to, participate if your friends could benefit, but that's something that's impossible to prove, and nobody ever tends to recuse themselves, in that regard.
No, good point, and that is a tough situation. I will say when it comes to people's own financial interests. So there is the idea of financial disclosure and having to file a financial disclosure report. And so, right now, I think it's a bit limited in Vermont who has to file a financial disclosure report. But however, that is an official government document. So you do have to disclose everything that you're required to disclose. And if you don't, then you are breaking the law. So right now we have a very limited number of people who have to file those financial disclosures, the governor, executive officers, candidates for statewide office. But that is something to consider when we're looking at municipal ethics, who else should be included in financial disclosure laws. So that's something else that I think to consider that might help alleviate some of the concerns that you have.
Anybody else? Love to hear input from other people on this, because I hear this all the time in every community.
Am I speaking out of turn here if I jump in? Is that Christine? Are you there, or can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I mean, he asked to hear from everyone. So if you want to weigh in, go for it.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure. I was jumping the hand raising thing there. So two things. One was to reiterate the open meetings and Zoom. And I think just from an inclusivity issue, Waterbury's been actually really great on a lot of different levels as far as municipality engagement. I've seen, in the 30 years, a change. I think the more recent members of the board, I think, are beginning to really understand what's happening and how to be positive in moving forward. But we still have lots of work to do. But what I think is working really well is Zoom participation, because it does allow someone like myself to be able to participate. I live sort of on the outskirts of town, and it's just much harder to get to the meetings. And it's been a very regular ability to engage and participate. So not ethical, but definitely helps to kind of keep things in check and understood. But on another level, just going back to that other point of financial ethical issues, I think one of the overlaps you might find going forward is, you're obviously working in the state land now, but from a municipal perspective, there's a lot of now with Act 46 and then all of the districting of various districts and some divorces and some, mergers. We have this kind of amalgamation. In Waterbury, we're partnered up with the Mad River Valley. We're now starting to see both the Mad River Valley and Waterbury people talking about breaking apart these districts because it doesn't seem to be functioning as well. And not to suggest that some of these more heavier bond issues are being raised to benefit certain people in the trades and the different industries of business growth. I would argue if we looked at organizations like Vita, who have rebranded, I know I'm forgetting their new moniker, but and I do have people that I know and I've previously worked with in these organizations. So I'm not trying to attack specific people or these departments and agencies. But when we look at economic development as a state and we think about, well, where are we going to do it? That brings a lot of ethical questioning, and it involves school districts just as much as anything, as far as creating bed base to support a school system as opposed to a public school system rather than, say, an independent setup. So those are questions like, I've always been higher education funding per pupil, but I would love to see government out of that equation personally, just because it's been such a grueling experience for me, and I don't want to get into it now, but I will share that with you because earlier somebody had spoken about these quasi-judicial boards. Title III, I think, is administrative, whereby the Agency of Education is allowed to appoint a judicial appointee if there's a matter of I won't get into it now, but essentially a quasi-judicial scenario within the school district. So it's not even through the courts. It's just somebody the Secretary of Education can pick to sit on the sort of judicial seat. These are really challenging things for me because most people won't have the resources to challenge the state agency's lead attorney. So, that's, I think, that's a space that you're going to find just a lot of gray area that as you move forward, you have to think about beyond just municipality and state. So thanks again. I appreciate it.
And I think next we had Annie and then Bradley again.
Yeah, two things, please. I do see some really intelligent things being said in the chat, and I don't mean to tell you what to do. I get like this, I get excited, but I see that Lorraine can't talk and she's saying some stuff, and then so anyway, I want to make sure that I'm not taking up too much air in the room, but was it Bill and Leslie, was it Bill that was talking before? I think about Charlotte and about, right? And so I think that this is the problem that Bill is speaking of, this kind of empowerment of your friends or the people that you're engaged, like there becomes this kind of solidification of the people when they start to move together as a unit in the board, which is great, right? Because there's agreement, there's collaboration, and we don't want dissent, but there's a moment where you lose healthy dialogue and where actual democracy, and I don't mean democratic like the Democrats and the Republicans, actual democracy cannot exist within a board of 5 or 7 or 10 who all have the same agenda because of back end conversations or because of things like Bill's talking about. And I think the hardest part is there's moments in time where the people who want to be elected next seem to think, seem to think, I'll say it like that, seem to think that the way to get elected next is to get buddy-buddy with the people who are currently in the roles. And that seems backwards to me because the people voting, like the you know, are a larger sum of people. And so I get confused when the dynamic starts to become too collaborative is a good word, but this word is like that gone awry a little bit. And so I think that these are the same things. And I think in a really healthy space, we want discussion at a table. We want not conflict, but you know, that thing that like in any art, in any creation, in anything that you're trying to do and get done well, you want that kind of sanding down to get to a really good place that's healthy. And so anyway, that's a lot, but thank you.
No, thank you. And I think Bradley is next.
Yeah, I just want to highlight something that Bill had said, because I think it's an important point, and I want to make sure it doesn't get lost, is that, you know, I think one of the things I've heard in talking to town officials about the concerns I have with specifically Development Review Board is, well, we need more volunteers to join the board. And I can tell you, at least from my perspective, that these perceived ethical issues are incredibly off-putting and would not attract volunteers, right? So it's sort of, when you have an ethical issue, it is a detractor to getting more volunteers into town positions, which then just further hurts the issue, right? So I think that point that Bill brought up about, you know, perceived ethical issues hurting recruitment is a really important piece and something to, I think, shouldn't be taken lightly. So that's all I want to add. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for that point, because honestly, like when you hear opposition to ethics legislation or, you know, ethics rules and policies in smaller places, there's an argument that comes up frequently, not just in Vermont, but in other locations as well, that if you have too many layers of bureaucracy, if you have too many ethics rules in place, that is what will deter people from volunteering. And so what you're saying is the opposite. If you have, you know, a perceived ethical issues among an existing board, then that is going to deter new people from volunteering. So. Thank you. So I don't see anyone else with their hand raised at the moment. So I'm not sure if there's anyone waiting who wants to weigh in, or any questions about specifically the framework that we're going to put forward, because we're happy to answer questions too, not just myself, but also the commissioners and TJ. So don't want to lose the opportunity for you to ask us questions, but if not, then this has been a really great discussion, and it's great to hear from everyone, because we don't often hear from. Oh, sorry, Paul wanted to say something.
Just that there are 3 hands up.
Sorry, I can't see them. So I have somebody texting me when there's a hand up. So that's why I'm looking down, but I missed those texts. So apologies. So it looks like Bill is waiting to speak.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback from a few people who responded to the recruitment issue. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy here. You know, not only in Charlotte, but in other communities where I've served, you know, Shelburne and South Burlington too, on the boards. You know, the last round of appointments that we had to our planning commission and DRB, we had many good qualified individuals apply, and none of them were appointed. They were all shot down in favor of appointing a former select board member who didn't even apply on time, who was friends with the current select board. That was so demoralizing to the people who applied that they're now swearing to never get involved with local issues again. And I want to stress, you know, I've lived in several communities, and this is not a one-time situation. qualified people get turned down all the time. And then this further hurts recruitment. And then select boards argue, I would say falsely, that they can't find good people to serve. I'm sure some of you have experienced this as well. And there are barriers to serving that select boards also promote. You know, not managing time well, not having meetings at convenient time, at times for people with families to serve. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy to get their own individuals that they want on these boards. The communities that I served have high population centers. It should not be that hard to find qualified applicants if you run the system fairly. So I hear over frequently that you can't find suitable volunteers, and I would argue that people would like to volunteer, but they find that it's either pointless to do so or it's not convenient for them to do so. And that's a problem that needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And I think that we have Elise and then Gina.
Yep, thank you. I'm really curious, Christina, about the scope of what the Ethics Commission takes on, the work that you're taking on. The reason I'm saying that is obviously we've had tons of different feedback going really granular into how municipalities work to, very high level. And I'm just looking over the work that you have done on the state level. I just wonder how are you determining the scope for the municipalities? Because I'm really curious with, as much as you've heard this evening, ultimately, what is it you as an ethics commission are responsible for? And then the Secretary of State and open meeting laws. And, so I really would love to hear how you're determining what that scope is. Thanks.
Sure. And I'll be honest. And so, the other commissioners can weigh in, or the commissioners, I'm not a commissioner, can weigh in. So with the history of the Ethics Commission it's been a very slow road when it comes to ethics in Vermont and getting ethics legislation passed. I mean, a very slow road. I've only been here for 2 years, but, we just had the state code of ethics, which is, right now, to be honest, not being enforced. That was only passed, it went into effect in July 1st, 2022. And so Vermont was one of the last states in the nation to not have a state code of ethics in place. And it took many years of work by the Ethics Commission before I was here to get that even to a place where we could kind of get it over the finishing line. And so we are going into this with big aspirations, but we have an understanding of the limitations because, I'm from Vermont. I've worked in a lot of other places, but coming back, I was quite surprised to learn how far behind Vermont is when it comes to ethics. Most other states started working on this, diligently in the 1970s, and in Vermont, it's just, it kind of only came about in the last 10 years after we, received an F grade from a national organization looking at ethics accountability and found that Vermont was, basically one of the worst. So that's how it kind of kick-started in, I think, 2015, and the Ethics Commission was set up in 2017. So there really is a lot of surprising resistance, even to just putting basic measures in place. And to be honest, I don't really understand where it comes from. I mean, I know the reasons that people say in terms of where it comes from, but I don't really understand because these are, really some very basic things. So when we're looking at municipal ethics and ethics moving forward, we have big aspirations, but we're trying to be realistic. And so if we're following what we've been able to do so far, it was getting the state code of ethics in place. And so it's a fairly basic code of ethics, but it does cover all of the main principles that need to be covered, and it sets the standards for everyone. And so before that, the standards were missing. Each branch of government has their own policies in place, but I think the judicial branch, their policies were drafted in 2002, and the executive branch 1996. So as you can see, not a lot of attention was being paid to ethics policies, and it wasn't in law, it was just policy. And as I think Bradley mentioned before, people don't like policies, they can just change them. It's not the same thing when it comes to the law. So when we're talking about scope, we're looking at what we've been able to do before. So we were able to get the state code of ethics passed. And so, our priority is going to be to get a municipal code of ethics passed that sets the standards throughout the state. So that is, our main priority going to this next session. And if you look at, the state code of ethics, you can see like what we were able to include in that state code of ethics. Of course, municipalities are different and they may have different issues. So we can, we're also looking at drafting a separate municipal code of ethics and looking at what would be covered there, right? So there's the main things that are going to be conflicts of interest. So it's the same standard for everyone in all municipalities, misuse of position, misuse of resources, whether or not there should be a gift policy in there, if that's an issue that people are concerned about. So, interest in contracts, that sort of thing. So we're looking at, what subtopics could be when it comes to municipalities. So I'm looking at that and then adding in the advice and guidance component, because that is something where, if somebody has an issue in their municipality and you want to get advice, you really just want to know what is the right thing to do here, then we're able to issue like a written advisory opinion. And so it doesn't have the effect of law, but it's something that everyone in the state can refer to. So like you can say, like, if people are having an internal discussion in municipality, like what is the right thing to do when this person has this type of conflict of interest? How can we find out whether this is correct or not? We'll have like a set of opinions that are on our website for everyone to view and for everyone to refer to. And if you want to get a sense of like how that works now, just go take a look at our website. We have a few advisory opinions that are up now, and it only reflects the past, few months because we didn't have a code of ethics in place before that. So what we're going for at this moment in time and for this next legislative session is we're looking at getting a municipal code of ethics in place, getting the, advisory and training components in place, and then next year looking at enforcement options, because that is going to be the most difficult piece to get passed, but also I think the most important piece. And so, but it is going to be something where there's going to be a lot of different opinions weighing in. And I think that is the issue that you're going to see the most resistance to the idea of independent enforcement. So this is the second year of a biennium. So just realistically, I don't think that an enforcement piece can get through this year, but I am hopeful about a municipal code of ethics. I am hopeful about advice and training, that sort of thing. And then spending the next 2 years really just trying to get the enforcement piece in place, not just for municipal ethics, but also for state government as well. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but happy to follow up if it didn't.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for that explanation. And yeah, I think we all know it's a long road to hoe, but but what I've seen on the state side, that makes sense to start on that really high level area, and then you dig deeper as you need to. But I think that consulting piece, that with people being able to have a place to go to ask for, and that includes people in the municipality too. Sometimes they're not always clear about what to do. So to have that expert advice, I think is really critical, and a process for sort of basically filing that stuff through and have resolutions to it, I think is really important. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And I think next we had Gina.
Yeah, that answered a lot of questions. That was fantastic. Thank you for that rundown. Because my concerns would be enforcement and outreach and education to not just municipality staff, but to the commissions and the committees that are basically volunteers, really, and to the communities. So I think, didn't the treasurer used to go, he had like a tour, he even promoted it like a tour when he did the, was it for voting? I think it was for voting, that he went to community and they had outreach that way, which was, I thought was fantastic. And I agree with Bill that it is such, we're so Vermont and we're so small that it's, someone's coach from baseball, when they were a kid that gets to be the planning commission chair that's making decisions or whatever. I mean, that's not in our head, but making these huge decisions that involve, thousands and thousands of dollars and really affect people's lives about what gets built behind their house, or whether we have crosswalks and where we have crosswalks. I mean, all kinds of things that affect our daily lives get influenced by people who keep the same seat for years and years. And then because it's Vermont, it tends to be, not always, but white men in the same positions over and over and over again. And we can't seem to bust out of that because, like Bill said, it's kind of like a chicken and an egg, where who wants to get involved in a group that seems not very welcoming or comforting or seems to be breaking ethical rules at times, and you hesitate to get involved at that level. So I don't know how you, Godspeed to you, because that's a big bite that you're taking right there. And I'm glad the process has started. We really need it. It's going to be good, I hope. Thank you.
No, thank you guys for bringing that up, because really that is one of the main arguments that gets pulled up when you're talking about ethics and in smaller locations. Like I said, not just in Vermont, is that if you have ethics rules in place, it's going to be a bar to people wanting to volunteer. So to hear this, counter argument that like that's not the bar, it's the fact that people are acting unethically that makes other people not want to serve. That's a really important counterpoint. So it's really appreciated. And I'd encourage anyone, I mean, everyone showed up today and that's wonderful. If you want to put things like that in writing so that we also just kind of have it in our files. So when we're writing our proposal, we can kind of reference, I mean, you've said it here, of course, in person as well, but if you know of anyone else who also is experiencing those same things, just having that documented, if you want to encourage them to write into us, if they don't want to come to one of the future meetings, then, that's great. And so what's really going to help us, I think, get this through is just show that the public really wants to see change, because we know people who don't want to see change are really going to be coming out. And so, we need to counterbalance that and show that, no, the public is really behind municipal ethics. And, here we can show you all of these comments we received.
Risa has a hand up.
Thank you. I can't even begin to say how excited I am about this commission and about this meeting. One of the things that I see happening regularly, I live in Essex Junction, is we'll have RFP responses, and those responses will use the chair of the committee determining who gets the proposal as a reference. Right there, that is a conflict. It's an ethical conflict. People are way too in bed with each other. Yes, I understand the same people keep showing up to be on the committees. There isn't room to get onto the committees because you're beating your head against the wall with everybody having their favored sons doing the work. It keeps getting worse rather than better. And I definitely understand that there are issues in the state, and I understand why looking at it from let's start up there is important. But you know something? If we hit out a whole bunch of things at the lowest levels, we hit out a whole bunch of things at basic municipalities, at the small towns and cities, maybe we could get something and work to the middle from the top and the bottom. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. And so I think, because we're a state, state agency, so we started with the state, but I think everyone kind of recognizes that there are just as many, if not many more problems in the municipal level. And so I know Jim Condos, who, was until recently the Secretary of State, I mean, that's something he said in his testimony, he's testifying, about the setup of the Ethics Commission. He addressed the fact that municipal ethics were actually where they heard the most complaints, and that was the area that really needed to be addressed. And so municipal ethics were considered when the Ethics Commission was set up. And I think what happened, instead of like bringing municipal ethics under the purview of the Ethics Commission, they decided to kind of do a data collection. And that was to have the Secretary of State's office log municipal complaints that came into their office for a couple of years. And they've continued to do it, even though the time period has passed. But I do know that they get, between like 60 and 90 something complaints a year related to municipal ethics. So, and that's far more than we get in our office related to any kind of ethics, whether it's state government or municipal ethics.
Thank you.
So I'm looking at my text in the chats. I'm not sure if there was a misspelling. Is there somebody named Rosa and Arisa who wanted to speak, or was it just the same person and there was a typo?
I made a typo.
Okay, that's good.
I have a question, if I may.
Okay, sure.
What can we do now to garner? This is recorded, right? And it's going to be public.
Yes.
And so, where we find that on your site where we found the meetings.
Yeah, so we have a YouTube channel so we actually have our training for state employees. I'm gonna say the training that is on our YouTube channel is not our finest work because we had to get it done very quickly. So there is a training for state officials that is available through CRAPS with the same substance, but we were able to kind of improve it. But if you go to our YouTube channel, that's where we have some training materials that are up, or one training, and we'll also put this meeting on the YouTube channel. So and you can find that on our website.
If we share that, and then the next time that public can come to a meeting is the third one, is the 2 more meetings from now, or can we come to the next one and just listen as well?
Yeah, of course, you can definitely come to the next one and listen. So we just wanted to kind of corral it. We didn't know how much response we were going to get. So we wanted to kind of hear from the public, have them have the opportunity to make sure they were heard, and then municipal officials, but anyone can attend any meeting that they want to.
And then is there space for, not so much public comment, but is there space within those meetings for things like hand raising, or probably not?
Yeah, no, we'll still do hand raising. I think when it comes to like the next session, we'll be hearing from municipal officials. So like if somebody is reaching out to us in advance, we want to make sure that, we kind of hear from them first.
Right.
With any leftover time, then it'll be more of an open conversation for people who want to weigh in and respond to what they've heard, or have their own new thoughts on it. So yes.
Great. So we can use this video to garner people to come again to the next one.
If you think it will help, then yes.
I'm going to try. I'm so excited. Thank you so much.
All right, I don't think we have any more hands raised, but I will mention that we're working on these recommendations for municipal ethics, but also under consideration. My understanding is ethics legislation more generally that is going to address financial disclosures and who should be filing financial disclosures. And so it's a related, but it's a separate issue from the municipal ethics. So I think that if anyone wants to reach out to your representative or legislator just to kind of weigh in, if you think that municipal officials should be filing financial disclosures and that should be a requirement on the state level, then I would also encourage you to do so, because that will be a related but also separate issue we won't be including that in the municipal ethics proposal, but that is something that we'll be discussing. So. Okay, so if that is all, I want to thank you all so much for coming, because it was really great to hear from people. So we know there are concerns out there. We get calls about it, but just to hear from so many people who like really deeply care about these issues, because I do get the sense that it's an emotional issue for a lot of people, that it really impacts their lives, and they're really doing what they can do to try and make change, but it's not so easy. So, and I totally understand that. I mean, it's not easy for us. So I can imagine if you're out there in your municipality trying to affect change in something like this, it's just such a long road. So thank you so much for showing up, and we're always happy to hear from anyone who has any concerns about ethics. So just thank you so much. And I'll let maybe if there's no one else who wants to speak, maybe let Paul do kind of a sign off. And we hope that if you want to come to our next meeting, the next 2 sessions and listen, please do. We'd love to see you again. So.
And as the person in charge of signing off, and as the chair of the commission, I guess I don't need to take a motion. I'll just adjourn the meeting. But with thanks to everybody for showing up and speaking up, and keep talking to us, and we'll keep talking with you too. Thanks again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody. I'm going to sign off too.